The crystal wineglass felt heavy in my hand as I set it down beside the untouched roast chicken on my plate. The dining room was quiet, too quiet, except for the faint hum of the chandelier above, its light casting long shadows across the polished oak table. That table, it was new, expensive, the kind my daughter Laura loved to show off, unlike the scratched-up one Charles and I had shared for years, back when dinners were about laughter, not judgment. Laura's house was all sharp angles and gleaming surfaces, a world away from my little condo on the edge of Chicago. I was 70 now, a retired English teacher, widowed for 15 years. I'd taught kids to love Shakespeare in Austen, but somehow I'd failed to teach my own daughter to see me, really see me. My mother-in-law just bought a mansion on Lake Michigan, Laura said, her voice casual, but sharp, like a knife slipping through silk. 3 stories, private dock, the works. What about you, Mom? Still in that tiny condo? The words hung there, heavy like the November air outside. Across the table, Laura's husband, David, let out a soft chuckle, the kind that's meant to sound polite but cuts just the same. Their kids, my grandkids, sat still, forks paused midair. Ethan, my 18-year-old grandson, glanced at me, his brown eyes wide, sensing something wrong but not quite sure what. I looked at Laura, really looked at her. At 45, she had her father's high cheekbones, but none of his warmth. Her hair was sleek, her dress tailored, her life polished, to a shine that left no room for someone like me, someone who counted pennies at the grocery store, who chose between new shoes and paying the electric bill. The silence stretched, taut, like a thread about to snap. I could feel David's eyes on me, his smirk hidden behind a sip of wine. Laura's lips curved into a smile, one she probably thought looked kind, but I saw the pity in it, the condescension. My hands trembled, not from age, but from something deeper. Anger, maybe, or hurt, or both. I thought of Charles, my Charles, and the violin that still hung on my condo wall, its strings silent since his cancer took him away. We'd dreamed of a life by the lake, of mornings spent listening to the water lap against the shore. That dream was gone, buried with him, and now my own daughter was reminding me of everything I didn't have. I set my napkin down, carefully, deliberately. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Ethan was still watching me, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. The other kids, Sophie and Liam, kept their eyes on their plates. Laura, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, I don't live in that condo anymore. Her eyebrows shot up, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. David leaned forward, his wineglass frozen halfway to his lips. I moved, I continued, meeting her gaze, to a house on Lake Michigan. Big place, with a view that takes your breath away. The lie slipped out so easily, so smoothly, that for a moment, I almost believed it myself. Laura's mouth opened, then closed. David's chuckle died in his throat. Ethan's eyes widened even more, a spark of something like wonder in them. Mom, Laura started, her voice uncertain now. What are you talking about? I didn't answer. I stood, slowly, feeling every ache in my knees. Every year of my 70 years, my chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a sound that echoed in the sudden quiet. I reached for my coat, my old wool one, frayed at the cuffs but still warm. Thank you for dinner, I said, my tone polite but firm. I should go. Mom, wait. Laura's voice had an edge now, a crack of worry, but I was already moving toward the door, past the framed photos of her perfect family, her perfect life. Photos from vacations I wasn't invited to, holidays I spent alone with a microwave dinner and an old movie. The front door clicked shut behind me, and the cold November air hit my face like a slap. Laura's neighborhood was all manicured lawns and 3-car garages, houses that screamed success. My little Honda, parked between a Lexus and a Tesla, looked out of place, shabby, like me. I'd bought it used, after selling Charles's old watch, the one thing I swore I'd never part with. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the keys. The engine coughed to life, a familiar rattle that matched the rhythm of my thoughts. I'd helped Laura buy this house, had dipped into my savings to cover their down payment when David's startup was still a dream. Back when I thought family meant being there, no matter what. The drive back to my condo took 27 minutes. I'd counted it before, measured the distance between my daughter's world and mine. 27 minutes through quiet streets, past houses where families gathered for Sunday dinners, where grandparents were welcomed, not pitied. My condo was in a faded building on the edge of downtown, all beige walls and flickering hallway lights, Unit 4C, third floor, no elevator. I climbed the stairs, each step a reminder of my age, my aloneness. Inside, my 500-square-foot world greeted me, a single room with a pull-out sofa bed, a tiny kitchen where the fridge hummed too loud, a window that looked out on a parking lot where kids sometimes skateboarded late at night, but it was mine. Every book on the shelf, every chipped mug in the cupboard, every photo on the wall, mine. No one could take it from me. No one could make me feel small here. I filled the kettle, the one Charles bought me for our 20th anniversary, and waited for the whistle. The ritual calmed me. The steam, the scent of chamomile tea. I settled into my armchair, a sagging thing I'd found at a thrift store, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Laura's words kept echoing, still in that tiny condo, as if my life was a failure, a disappointment, as if I was less than her mother-in-law with her mansion, her private dock. Charles used to say I had a poet's heart, too soft for my own good, but tonight, something harder had stirred inside me, something fierce. I wasn't sure what it meant yet, but it felt like the start of something big. The life felt alive, like a spark catching in dry grass. I'd said it, told Laura and David I'd moved to a house on Lake Michigan, a big one, with a view that could steal your breath, and for a moment, standing there, in their pristine dining room, I felt powerful. Not the trembling, tired woman who'd climbed 3 flights of stairs to her condo every day for years, but someone else, someone I hadn't been in a long time. I sat in my armchair now, the chamomile tea gone cold in my chipped mug. The condo was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional rumble of a car in the parking lot. Below, my eyes drifted to the bookshelf, to the rows of novels I'd taught my students to love. Jane Eyre, The Great Gatsby, books about people who refused to be defined by their circumstances. I wondered, when had I stopped being one of those people? Laura's words kept circling in my head, still in that tiny condo, as if my life was a footnote, something to be pitied. I thought of Ethan's face at dinner, his wide eyes, the way he'd looked at me like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. My grandson, the only one who'd seemed to see me, even if just for a moment. I stood, my knees protesting, and walked to the small desk where my old laptop sat. It was a refurbished thing, bought cheap after I'd sold Charles's watch. I opened it, the screen flickering to life, and typed Lake Michigan homes for sale into the search bar. The results flooded in. Images of houses with wide porches, windows that caught the morning light off the water, prices that made my heart stutter. 2 million, 3 million, numbers so far beyond my pension and savings they might as well have been in another language. But I kept scrolling, letting myself imagine a house with a garden, maybe roses like the ones Charles used to plant, a room where I could write, not just lesson plans or grocery lists, but stories, the kind I'd always told myself I'd write someday, when there was time. Charles used to say I had a gift for words. Evelyn, he'd tell me, his violin tucked under his chin, you see the world like a poet. Don't let it go to waste. But after he died, after the hospital bills, and the lawyers, and the endless paperwork, I'd let that part of myself slip away. It was easier to survive than to dream. My phone buzzed on the desk, snapping me out of my thoughts. A text from Laura. Mom, what was that about? A house on the lake. Are you okay? I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment. Are you okay? As if my lie was a symptom, a sign I was losing my grip, not a spark of defiance, not a refusal to be small. I didn't reply. Let her wonder. Let her sit with the uncertainty, the way I'd sat with her dismissal for years. Another text came through. We're worried. Mom, call me. Worried. I almost laughed, a dry, quiet sound that didn't feel like mine. When had Laura last asked about my life, my dreams? When had she called just to talk, not to check if I'd paid my bills or taken my pills? I turned the phone face down, let the silence settle over me like a blanket. The kettle was still warm. I poured another cup of tea, the steam curling up like a memory. I thought about the last Christmas I'd spent alone, eating a frozen lasagna while Laura's family posted photos from a ski trip in Colorado. I hadn't been invited, hadn't even been called. The ache of it was still there, sharp, like a splinter under the skin. But tonight, something was different. That lie, that reckless, beautiful lie about a house on the lake, it had unlocked something. A hunger I thought I'd buried years ago, a need to be more than Laura's mother, more than a widow in a condo, more than a woman who'd learned to make herself small so others could feel big. I opened the laptop again, clicked on a listing, a cedar shingle cottage, perched on a bluff overlooking Lake Michigan. The photo showed a porch swing, a stretch of water shimmering under the sun. I could almost hear the waves, the soft lapping sound Charles and I used to fall asleep to on our honeymoon in a rented cabin by the lake. We'd talked about retiring there, in a place where the water was the loudest thing in the morning, but life had other plans. Cancer, bills, Laura's growing distance. I'd convinced myself those dreams were foolish. That practicality was all I had left. My phone buzzed again. This time, David. Evelyn, Laura's upset. What's this about a house? Call us, Evelyn. Not Mom, not even Mother, just my name. Cold and formal, like I was a stranger. It stung, more than I wanted to admit. I'd never asked them to call me anything specific, never demanded the closeness of family titles, but every time they used my first name, it was a reminder. I was on the outside of their lives. I guessed at best, a burden at worst. I turned off the phone, set it in the drawer with the unpaid bills and the old letters from Charles. Tomorrow, I'd have to face the consequences of my lie. Laura would ask questions. David would probe. Maybe even Ethan would want to know more. And I'd have to decide whether to keep up the story or let it crumble. But tonight, I let myself dream. I pulled the sofa bed down, the springs creaking under the weight of routine. I slipped into my nightgown, soft flannel, a gift I'd bought myself last birthday when no one else remembered. The fabric smelled faintly of lavender. A small sachet I kept in the drawer. A tiny act of defiance against a world that tried to make me feel invisible. As I lay in the dark, I imagined the lake, the way the water would catch the sunrise, turning it gold and pink, the way the wind would carry the scent of wet sand and reeds. I'd grown up near Lake Michigan, spent my childhood summers chasing minnows in the shallows, collecting smooth stones to line my windowsill. Charles and I had promised each other we'd go back, build a life there, but he was gone at 58, taken too soon, and I'd been left to navigate the aftermath alone. Laura had been in her 30s then, busy with her career, her new family, offering condolences but little else now. In the quiet of my condo, I wondered what Charles would think of me. Would he recognize the woman who'd told such a bold lie? Would he smile at the spark of rebellion, or worry about what came next? Outside, a siren wailed, someone else's crisis cutting through the night. But in my mind, I heard waves, the soft, steady rhythm of Lake Michigan, calling me to a life I wasn't sure I could claim. For tonight, that was enough. The morning after the dinner, I woke to a strange kind of clarity. The condo felt smaller somehow, the walls closer, the hum of the fridge louder. My phone was still in the drawer, silent, but I could imagine the messages piling up. Laura's worry, David's questions, maybe even something from Ethan, though I doubted it. Kids his age don't know how to bridge gaps like that. Not yet. I made my tea, chamomile, as always, and sat by the window, watching the parking lot come to life. Mrs. Kowalski from 4B shuffled out with her walker, her terrier yapping at her heels. The young couple from downstairs loaded their bikes onto a car rack, off to some adventure I'd never know. These were my people, my little world. But it wasn't enough anymore. Not after last night, not after that lie, that reckless, beautiful lie about a house on the lake. That I needed air. I pulled on my coat, the frayed wool one, and drove to the lakefront. Lake Michigan stretched out before me, gray and endless, under a November sky. The wind carried the scent of water and wet leaves, sharp, clean, like a memory of childhood. I walked along the path, past joggers and dog walkers, until I reached a small art fair set up near the harbor. Booths lined the shore, filled with paintings, pottery, handmade scarves. That's where I met Margaret. She was standing by a booth, her silver hair pulled back in a messy bun, her hands stained with paint. She was 68, 2 years younger than me, but her eyes had a spark I hadn't seen in my own reflection in years. Her paintings were everywhere, Canvases of Lake Michigan, in every mood. Stormy, serene, golden at dawn. Beautiful, isn't it? She said, catching me staring at a painting of waves crashing against rocks. It is, I said, my voice soft, almost lost in the wind. It's like you've captured the lake's soul. She laughed. A warm, gravelly sound. I try. Been painting it for 30 years. Never get it quite right. She extended a hand. Margaret Reed. I live up the shore a bit. Come here when I need to remember why I paint. Evelyn Carter, I said, shaking her hand. Her grip was strong, sure, like she'd spent her life holding brushes and dreams. We talked, longer than I expected, about the lake, about art, about the way life changes when you're not looking. I told her about my years teaching English, about Charles and his violin, about the dreams we'd had that never came true. I didn't mention Laura, or the lie, but something about Margaret made me feel like I could, if I wanted to. You look like you're carrying something heavy, she said finally, her eyes searching mine. The lake's good for that. Washes it away, if you let it. I smiled. A small, tired thing. I told a lie yesterday, a big one. Her face lit up, like I'd confessed to something wonderful. Good for you. About time you shook things up. I blinked, surprised. You don't even know what I lied about. Doesn't matter, she said, brushing paint from her sleeve. The way you said it tells me everything. Someone's been making you feel small, and you decided to push back. I didn't know what to say. She was right. But hearing it out loud felt like a door swinging open. I told her the lie, about the house on Lake Michigan, about how it had slipped out at Laura's dinner table, a shield against her pity. Do you want it to be true? Margaret asked, her voice gentle but firm. I looked out at the lake, the water catching the pale sunlight. More than anything, she nodded, like she understood. I've got a place, a house up the shore, nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, a sagging porch, but it's got the lake right there, singing, you two sleep every night. I've been thinking about a housemate, someone to split the bills, maybe share a pot of coffee in the morning. My heart skipped, a flutter I hadn't felt in years. Why would you offer that to a stranger? Because I was a stranger once, she said simply. Moved here after my husband died. No one to lean on, no idea what came next. Someone gave me a chance then. I'm just passing it along. She handed me a card, plain white, with her name and number scrawled in blue ink. Think about it, Evelyn. Call me if you're interested. I'll show you the place. I drove home, the card tucked in my coat pocket, my mind spinning. $400 a month, she'd said. Utilities split 2 ways, more than I was paying for the condo. But not impossible. Not if I was careful. Not if I let myself believe I deserved it. Back in my condo, I sat at my desk, the laptop still open to that cedar shingle cottage. I pulled out my old typewriter, a relic from my teaching days, and started typing. Not a lesson plan, not a grocery list, but a story about a woman who walked away from a life that didn't fit anymore, who found a home by the water. The keys clacked under my fingers, the sounds steady like waves. For the first time in years, I felt alive, like I was writing my own ending, not someone else's. But the phone kept buzzing. Laura again. Mom, we need to talk. This isn't like you. This isn't like you. I almost laughed. How would she know what was like me? When was the last time she'd asked about my days, my hopes, my fears? When had she seen me as anything but a problem to manage, a mother to check on, a box to tick off her list? I ignored the texts, let them pile up unanswered, let her wonder about the house on the lake, about the mother she thought she knew. The next morning, I called Margaret. I'd like to see the house, I said, my voice trembling with something like hope. She met me at the harbor, her paint-stained jeans catching the morning light. The house was just as she'd described, a weathered wooden thing perched on a low bluff, the lake stretching out before it like an invitation. Inside, the rooms were small but warm, painted in soft greens and blues, Margaret's canvases lining the walls. The bedroom she showed me had a window facing the water, a desk tucked beneath it, like it was waiting for someone to sit and write. I'll take it, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. Margaret smiled. Don't you want to talk it over with your family? My family thinks I'm losing my mind, I said, half laughing. They're probably planning an intervention as we speak. Then let's give them something to talk about, she said, her eyes twinkling. We moved my things that weekend. 10 boxers, a lifetime packed into cardboard. The condo looked empty without them, just a shell of the life I'd been living. I left a note on the counter, propped against the coffee maker. Gone to the lake. The people who care about me know where to find me. As I drove to Margaret's house, my Honda rattling under the weight of my boxers, I felt something shift inside me. Not just the lie becoming real, but something bigger. A chance to be Evelyn again. Not Laura's mother, not Charles's widow, but me. The lake was waiting. Its waves whispering promises I was finally ready to hear. The lake was restless that morning. Waves crashing against the bluff with a rhythm that matched my pulse. I sat at the desk in my new room, Margaret's house, my house, for now, typing on the old typewriter. The keys clacked steadily, each word a small rebellion. I was writing about the lake, about a woman who'd forgotten how to dream until the water reminded her. It felt like a confession, or maybe a promise to myself. 3 weeks had passed since I'd moved in. Margaret's house was everything I'd imagined. The creak of the porch swing, the way the light spilled through the windows, painting the walls in shades of blue and gold. I'd started to belong here, to the lake, to the quiet mornings with Margaret over coffee, to the neighbors who waved when I walked to the harbor market. But the peace wasn't complete. Laura's texts had turned frantic. "Mom, where are you? We're worried." David's calls came next, clipped, formal, like he was scheduling a meeting. "Evelyn, we need to talk about this house nonsense." I'd ignored them all. Let the silence be my answer. But I knew it couldn't last. It didn't. The knock came on a Tuesday, sharp and insistent, like it was demanding answers. I glanced out the window, my stomach twisting. Laura's sleek black SUV was in the driveway, flanked by David Saudi. A third car pulled up, a plain sedan, and out stepped a woman in a gray blazer, carrying a clipboard behind her. Dr. Ellis, Laura's family doctor, his face set in that practiced look of concern. "Margaret," I called, my voice steadier than I felt. "We have company." She appeared from her studio, paintbrush in hand, her expression darkening as she peered outside. "Looks like an ambush," she muttered, wiping her hands on her jeans. The knock came again, louder. Margaret opened the door, and Laura's voice carried through the house, confident, patronizing, the tone of someone who thought they were fixing a problem. "Good morning. I'm Laura Bennett, Evelyn's daughter. I believe my mother's staying here." "Evelyn Carter lives here," Margaret said, her voice cool but firm. "My housemate, a very capable woman, I might add." "There's been a misunderstanding," Laura said. Her words clipped. "My mother's not well. She's been saying things, claiming she owns a house on the lake. It's not possible. She's been living in a condo downtown, barely scraping by." I stood at the top of the stairs, listening, my hands clenched into fists. Not well, barely scraping by. Laura was rewriting me, turning me into a frail old woman who needed saving. I descended slowly, each step deliberate, my best navy sweater and slacks, feeling like Arma. "Hello, Laura," I said, my voice calm, polite. "David, Dr. Ellis." I nodded to the woman with the clipboard. "And you are?" "Karen Walsh," she said, adjusting her glasses. "I'm with Adult Protective Services. We received a report about possible financial exploitation. An elderly woman claiming property beyond her means." My blood turned cold. Laura had called apps, my own daughter, reporting me like I was a danger to myself. I looked at her, searching for the girl who used to curl up in my lap, reading Charlotte's Web while Charles played his violin. But that girl was gone, replaced by a woman who saw me as a problem to be managed. "Financial exploitation," I repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "And who made that report?" "Ms. Walsh." She glanced at her notes, hesitated. "The caller expressed concern about it was Laura," I said. "Not a question. My daughter, who decided I couldn't possibly afford to live here, because she's never bothered to ask about my life." Laura's face flushed, a flicker of guilt crossing her eyes before she squared her shoulders. "Mom, that's not fair. You left without telling us where you were going. Your condo's empty. Your phone goes to voicemail. You're talking about a house on the lake, something you can't afford." "Can't afford," I said softly, almost to myself. I turned to Ms. Walsh. "Would you like to know how I'm paying for this place?" Laura stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Mom, stop. This isn't you. You're confused. Maybe overwhelmed. Dr. Ellis thinks we should evaluate." "My cognition is fine," I cut in, my tone sharper now. But if you'd like to test it, Dr. Ellis, I'm happy to sit for an exam, right after I show you something. I walked to the desk, where a folder sat among my notebooks, not the simplified bank statements I'd shown Laura years ago to avoid her lectures, but the real ones, the ones I'd kept private. Because I was tired of being judged, I opened it, pulled out a document, and handed it to Laura. Her eyes scanned the page, then widened. This can't be right. $80,000, I said, my voice steady, almost serene. Not a fortune, but enough to rent a room here. Enough to live with dignity. Instead of just surviving. David grabbed the paper from her, his brows furrowing. Where did you get this kind of money? I smiled. A small, private thing. I wrote a book, under a pen name, about 15 years ago, after Charles died. It was a novel, about a woman starting over after loss. It sold better than I expected. I invested the royalties, carefully, in small presses, local businesses. I didn't tell you, because you never asked. The room went silent, except for the waves, outside, steady, relentless. Laura's mouth opened, then closed. David stared at the paper, as if it might rewrite itself. Dr. Ellis cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Ms. Walsh adjusted her glasses again, her expression softening. You wrote a book, Laura said finally, her voice small, almost childlike. I did, I said, and it's still selling. Not enough to buy a mansion, but enough to choose my own life, to live here, with a friend who respects me. I glanced at Margaret, who gave me a nod, her eyes gleaming with something like pride. Ms. Walsh, I continued, turning to the social worker, there's no exploitation here. I pay my rent on time, $400 a month, utilities split. I'm mentally sound, financially stable. The only thing I've been exploited by is my daughter's assumption that I'm less than I am. Laura flinched, like I'd struck her. Mom, I was trying to protect you. I thought you were being scammed. Or worse. Worse, I asked, my voice quiet but firm. Worse than what, Laura? Than being happy. Than choosing a life you didn't approve of. When was the last time you asked me what I wanted, what I dreamed of, what I was capable of? She didn't answer. David shifted, his eyes on the floor. Dr. Ellis mumbled something about a misunderstanding. Ms. Walsh closed her clipboard, her face professional but kind. Mrs. Carter, it's clear you're managing just fine. I'm sorry for the intrusion. They left. Laura laughed, pausing at the door. Mom, I didn't mean. I know what you meant, I said. My voice softer now, but not warm. You thought I was a burden, not a person. The difference is, I never thought you were anything less than capable of seeing that. The door closed, and the house was quiet again. Margaret set her paintbrush down, crossed her arms. 85,000, she said, a grin spreading across her face, and a book. Nicely done, Evelyn. I sank into a chair, my hands shaking, not with fear, but with a fierce kind of satisfaction. I'd spent years hiding that book, hiding the royalties, because I didn't want Laura's judgment, her lectures about wasting money on dreams. But today, I'd claimed it, claimed myself. Outside the lake kept its rhythm, steady, eternal. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living, and for the first time in years, I was ready for whatever came next. 3 years have passed since that dinner at Laura's, since the lie about a house on Lake Michigan became the truest thing I'd ever said. I'm 73 now, and the lake is my home, not just in words, not just in dreams, but in the cedar shingle cottage I bought last spring, perched on a bluff where the water sings me awake each morning. It wasn't easy getting here. Laura didn't give up after our confrontation. Not at first. She tried to have me evaluated, claimed I was showing signs of instability because I'd moved without her permission. She even hired a lawyer. Dug through my old medical records, found notes from a therapist I'd seen after Charles died. Grief, she called it, evidence. But the lake, and Margaret, and the truth of my book, they held me steady. The lawyer backed off when my publisher sent a letter, confirming my royalties, my competence. Word spread in Laura's circles, small towns talk, even in Chicago's suburbs. People whispered about the daughter who tried to control her mother, only to learn she'd written a bestseller under a pen name. Laura's reputation took a hit, and she stopped calling. I didn't feel vindictive, just tired of explaining myself, of being her problem to solve. But then, Ethan found me, my grandson, now 21. a lanky art student with his father's cheekbones and a heart I hadn't expected. He showed up one morning, standing on my porch, holding a dog-eared copy of my book. "I read this last semester," he said, his voice shaking. "Didn't know it was you, Grandma." Grandma. The word hit me like a gift, soft and warm, like the blanket Charles used to drape over me when I fell asleep reading. Ethan had tracked me down, spent months piecing together clues from my book's bio, the lake references, the harbor market. He'd come to apologize for the dinner, for the years of silence, for not seeing me sooner. We cried, then laughed, then sat on the porch, watching the lake turn gold under the sunset. He told me about art school, about his sketches of the city, about how Laura had forbidden him from contacting me, claiming I was unstable, but Ethan had read my words, felt the strength in them, and decided to choose for himself. We opened a shop together, a little place in the harbor called Lake Whispers, books on one side, Ethan's sketches and Margaret's paintings on the other. It's not big, but it's ours. Customers come for the art, stay for the stories we tell, about the lake, about starting over. My second book came out last year, a collection of essays about the water, about finding home. It sold enough to put a down payment on the cottage, enough to make the lie real. Laura hasn't reached out. Last I heard, she and David moved to a bigger house, chasing something I don't think they'll ever find. I don't wish them ill, but I don't miss them either. Ethan's here, and Margaret, and the neighbors who bring me tomatoes from their gardens. This is my family now, the one I chose. Each morning, I write at my desk, the lake stretching out before me. I write letters to Charles, words I'll never send, about the life we dreamed of, the one I'm living now. The waves keep time, steady, eternal, reminding me that nothing stays buried, not pain, not dreams, not truth, and that's the lesson I've learned. The one I'd share if you asked. You're never too old to start again, to choose yourself, to build a life that fits your heart. It starts with a spark, maybe a lie you tell to save your soul, but it ends with truth, the kind that rises like the tide and carries you home.